because of the way that I look, that's always going to be an immediate conversation with people who don't know me, to assume that, just ask questions like, but where are you originally from? And it just further suggests that I'm not from here, I don't belong here, and no matter if I'm born here, I was raised here, I attended school here, university here, I worked here, all of my life, people will still think you don't belong here, you don't come from here, you're not originally from here. It shouldn't take for someone to be physically assaulted or physically set fire to or thrown acid on for someone to say, oh, this is racism, this is wrong. All types of racism is racism, and that filters down from everyday microaggressions, everyday hate crimes, the odd comment here and there, pulling back your eyes, you know, all of this stuff builds up, and it's just, enough is enough, enough is enough. And hello my loves, this is going to be a very, very different type of video that I normally would film, but it's a very, very important video that I wanted to address here on YouTube, because I realised that I talk at length about racism and hate crimes, and especially the increase of hate crimes towards Chinese, East Asian and Southeast Asian communities in the UK during the pandemic, but I don't talk about it nearly enough, and I'm not doing nearly enough as I should be on my main platform, which is on YouTube. Today's a very, very emotional day, and I've already had a little bit of a cry, so I'm going to try and hold it together, because it's been a very emotionally triggering 24 hours. Today, which is Tuesday the 13th of October at 4:30 p.m. BST, MP Sarah Owen is going to be holding the first ever debate tackling the increase of racism towards East Asian and Southeast Asian communities in the UK, and she's going to be raising this in Parliament. I know I have a very big Asian audience and a very big community of fellow British-born Chinese viewers as well, and thank you so much for all of your continued support over the years. And I feel like it is my moral responsibility to have this platform online, no matter how big or how small, to do as much as I can to raise awareness, to talk about it, and to be able to be at a place to share another perspective of why this is important and why these type of conversations need to be had, because racism isn't new, you know, and all of these things that have been happening over the past few months, it isn't new. It's been happening for so long, but because of everything that's been happening with COVID-19 this year, it has just increased so much, and it's just brought out so much type of behaviours that are frankly just unacceptable, and there needs to be accountability. There needs to be no tolerance when it comes to racism across all forms, whether that is everyday microaggressions, you know, things that we just brush off because it's part and parcel of what it means to be British and a person of colour living here. There were meant to be several stories that were meant to be covered across these major news outlets, and this morning, after a whirlwind 24 hours, I was going to be talking about my experience of experiencing this in February when I first came back from Australia on a work trip at the airport, and kind of give a bit of context. When I first arrived at the arrivals after a very, very long, like 27 hours of flying, I was trying to get through the e-passport gate with my passport, and there's usually like a queue for British and EU passports to go through the e-passport gate. So I was going through with my friend amongst a crowd of people, and a member of staff was then like shouting over me, being like, madam, what passport do you have, what passport do you have? And I was like, British passport, like kind of like, you know, brushing it off, because this happens all the time. Where are you originally from? Because you sound British but you don't look British. And so I kind of tried to continue making my way across, and she kept shouting and singling me out of the crowd, being like, madam, what passport do you have? This is the British line. What passport do you have? This is the British line. And it took for me to have to physically take my passport to show her the cover of my British passport for her to mutter, oh, she is British, and let me go. And I was very calm about it, because shouldn't be calm, but it's one of those things that have happened all throughout my life, you know, of people being like, oh, where are you from? You sound British. Like, where are you really from? Where are you originally from? That has just become one of those things that I don't want to put extra energy towards this now, because I'm tired of it. My friend, on the other hand, was absolutely horrified, and she couldn't believe what she had just witnessed, and I was trying to explain, like, this happens all the time, you know, it's part of who I am here. And then made our way through passport gates, which, by the way, never recognises my face and I had to always physically go and manually do it afterwards as well, after the gate literally denying you entry because loads of different reasons. And then afterwards, when I had booked a taxi to go home, and the taxi driver, and this was before the safety measures put in place to wear face coverings on public transport and to, obviously like sanitize regularly, which you should be doing anyway. But this was before any of those safety measures were even brought into England and the wider rest of the UK. So got out of the airport with my luggage, and the driver came out, looked me up and down, and then went into the car and got a face mask and put it over him. And I was a bit like, okay, it's good to be safe, it's good to be, cautious. And then afterwards, he then went and got gloves and was handling my case with his gloves. And now, this is type of everyday behaviour, and that's become the new normal, I hate that term, of what we do now. These are the procedures and the processes that we follow. But back then, that was in February, it wasn't introduced, and it wasn't an everyday occurrence. So it just definitely felt like it was an action because of the way that I looked. But I try not to think of it like that, because I never like to think that anyone is ever malicious. So sat in the taxi, and then he immediately was like nervously going, "Did you just come back from China or Korea?" And I was just like, "No, I just came back from a work trip in Australia." And he was like, "Oh, okay, because it's been brought over here now, it's here." Then he was like, "Oh, so where are you originally from? Where are you from?" And I was like, "I'm British." And I was like, "Okay, where are you originally from?" I was born in London, I'm British born Chinese. And I was like, "Oh yeah, it's been it's been brought over here." And at this point, because of that, and like 10 minutes earlier with the lady at the airport just saying, "This is the British line," and I had to see my passport, I'm like, I'm just tired now. I'm just tired of this all the time, and I'm tired of being okay with it. I'm tired of being like, oh, that's just one of those things that it's just part of being a person of colour here. Oh, let's try and calm down. Not get emotional, because I want to get my points across. But what I'm saying is that all of this type of stuff isn't new to anyone who's a person of colour in these communities. This kind of thing happens on a daily occurrence. It's happened all throughout our lives, and there's that lack of sense of belonging here that's always going to stay with you. That even though I was born in London, I was brought up in England, I live here, I've never lived abroad, I've only ever lived in England, but because of the way that I look, that's always going to be an immediate conversation with people who don't know me, to assume that, just ask questions like, "But where are you originally from?" And it just further suggests that I'm not from here, I don't belong here. And no matter if I'm born here, I was raised here, I attended school here, university here, I worked here all of my life, and I don't know any different from what life is like in another country, people will still think you don't belong here, you don't come from here, you're not originally from here. And all of this has led to, there's been a 300% of increase of hate crimes towards East Asian and Southeast Asian communities. There's been a disproportionate amount of deaths related to Filipino health workers who work for the NHS. And there has just been there's been an increase of this type of behaviour that's been going on because of labels like the Chinese virus, the Kung flu, and because of that, members of the community are directly affected by these actions. So even though these levels of surface level everyday microaggressions that we brush off, they are all impactful, they all contribute towards this view that you're labelling entire communities, you're labelling an entire races of people and associating them with a global pandemic and a virus, when not every single person who is Asian or East Asian, Southeast Asian have the virus. And there is such a lack of awareness, and I think it comes from a place of ignorance from people not realising exactly how hurtful and how harmful these messages, these kind of comments can make. And after a series of going through and hearing of kind of stuff all throughout your life, and to people actually being physically attacked and physically abused, there was a grandmother in, I believe New York, who was set fire to by a group of young people, and which was a hate crime and she was too scared to tell her families because she didn't want them to worry. This is happening to people of all ages, and what absolutely breaks my heart is that when I read these type of accounts every single day on social media, I hear members of the community going through this. I hear takeaways being vandalized, businesses being vandalized. I hear people coughing on other members of the community, people calling them the coronavirus, bat eaters, get out of our country, go back to where you come from, setting fire to the elderly, someone was pouring acid on someone's face, and I waited outside so she came out and poured acid over her because she was Asian. all of this type of stuff is not new. It's happening more and more and more, and I just feel like there is just such a lack of awareness about it from news outlets, from the mass media. There's so much that can be done from the key decision makers, the gatekeepers, the top levels of government to address all of these type of things and to publicly condemn and to say this type of behaviour is wrong and this type of stuff should not be allowed, should not be tolerated, and it's up to that to be filtered down to the everyday occurrences for people to realise that it doesn't take a full-on hate crime. It shouldn't take for someone to be physically assaulted or physically set fire to or thrown acid on for someone to say, oh, this is racism, this is wrong. All types of racism is racism, and that filters down from everyday microaggressions, everyday hate crimes, the odd comment here and there, pulling back your eyes. You know, all of this stuff builds up, and it's just enough is enough. Enough is enough. And yeah, sorry that I really try not to be too emotional, because I know I'm a very, very emotional person and I say a lot of things from the heart, and that obviously comes with this. And I wanted to be eloquent, I wanted to deliver these points eloquently and calmly and respectfully, but it was just so disheartening, like going through all of these accounts with these news outlets who wanted to cover the story ahead of the debate and to raise awareness about it. And I was saying to the journalists on the phone, like, thank you so much for running this across these news outlets, because it's such an important story. It's just so important to the communities for this to be spoken about on a wider scale on such a public platform. So we were going through all of these different things. We did endless interviews before the actual interview today. I woke up early today to kind of like really brush up on my research, like really, I should be doing anyway, I should be educating myself anyway, but just wanted to make sure I was like calling different people, calling my manager who's also British born Chinese, just to make sure that this is such a huge responsibility, even if it's like 10 seconds of airtime. That's 10 seconds more than we've ever had. And then just got a call right before I was heading out the door. We don't have enough resources anymore. There's another breaking news story that we have to cover instead. So we're not going to be running this story anymore. And it is so disheartening to not only have to repeat multiple times on the phone over the past 24 hours, having to be so anxious about it, of wanting to do a good job, speaking to people from the communities to make sure that everything I'm saying is going to be, you know, still responsible and still deliver the message. And obviously I wasn't planning on crying on the actual interview as well. It's only because of like them cutting it off now after I've like built myself up all day. And it just felt like these stories have now been kicked to the curb, and this isn't deemed important enough to be covered anymore. And what was breaking news before and what was something that could have had such a wide reach before is now not important enough, because another more important story has come in. And oh, sorry for wasting your time, but thanks for rearranging your whole day. I was meant to be shooting the whole day today, and I've had to panic and cancel on an event. I cancelled on and multiple work events. I've cancelled on a 4-day shoot. I've moved everything around, so I wanted to like, you know, it's such an important story only to be told one after the other, the same news outlet to say, we're not covering this nationally anymore, we're not covering this on the local perspective anymore because another story's coming. It's so disheartening. And I thought, if the news outlets aren't going to cover it, I'll cover it on my YouTube channel. You know, I talk about this at length on my Instagram. I've spoken about this as well when we did the British Chinese documentary with BBC4 earlier this year, which I am always so thankful for them to have put it on such a wide platform, and for them to always have listened, and they were always just such a big part of this, you know. This is my main platform, and we've got nearly 54,000 people on this platform, and a lot of us are from the same communities. And I just would like to stress that I never want to take this platform for granted, no matter how big or how small. Please know that I will always do what I can to support this and to stand behind this, because I realise that it's going to quote like, with a thing great comes great responsibility, but with a platform does come great responsibility, and it is our moral responsibility to show both sides of the coin. And when I talk about representation on the screens, I talk a lot about being British Chinese, but I feel like true representation is if I was to represent things like food and travel and lifestyle without having to blink of an eye that, oh, I'm Chinese, and making a big show and tell of being like, oh my gosh, she's Chinese and she's talking about food that isn't Chinese food, and she's talking about travel that isn't going to Asian countries and that kind of stuff. That to me is representation. Diversity should be normalized, you know, like having a diverse spectrum of people being represented in society and the media should be a normal thing. And I'm British, I should be able to talk about these subjects because this is all I've ever known. I always want to learn more. There's so much more for me to learn, there's so much more that I could be doing, and there's so much more for me to be doing as well. But thank you as always for all of your support on this, and I am going to link to non-profit organisations that have been set up by members of the communities, and that is BC, which stands for British East and Southeast Asian Network, and it's been set up by 6 members of the community, and 6 incredible, inspiring, empowering, wonderful women who have worked tirelessly on this to even get this conversation that's happening later today in Parliament anyway, by setting up a petition. So please do check out the website and the social pages. They've got a ton of resources, and also I'm going to link End the Virus of Racism, who are also a non-profit and the first ever non-profit organisation that tackles racism and hate crimes towards East Asian and Southeast Asians in the UK, following everything that's been happening during the pandemic as well. So please do check them out. I will link their pages, I will link their websites. They've got loads of resources, FAQs. You can find out more about each member behind and all of the fantastic work that they do, not only towards activism across racism and hate crimes, but also representing the communities, but also all of the other talented, wonderful things they do that doesn't involve them speaking about this all the time. Because please do realise that talking about all of this stuff is incredibly triggering, it's incredibly emotional, as you can tell, because it's flipping through archives of lived experiences that we've happened over the past year that you try to desperately ignore and try to desperately focus on other things, but when it's just doors being slammed quite literally in your face to say, like, you know what, I feel like this story doesn't qualify and it's not breaking news anymore, that it is just so taxing and tiring and exhausting, and enough is enough. So thank you if you've watched to this bit. Such a long video. Thank you so much for watching all of this, and again, sorry for being so emotional. I really try not to be too emotional online because I know I'm a very emotional person, but this is me. And yeah, I want to send you all so much love. Thank you for tuning in, and I'm going to be back to travel videos and food videos and lifestyle videos and more fashion ones, because a lot of people wanted to see fashion and beauty as well after this. So yeah, thank you so much. I love you all, and yeah, thank you.